if we click on our add modifier and we go under generate to select an array. What an array is, if you're not familiar with the concept, pretty much items in a row, or it's like a group of data or a group of variables or a stack of information pretty much. So you can see that if we turn off the visibility of this array modifier and we turn it back on, what it's done is added one cube along the x-axis, and the 1 means exactly the length of one of these cubes, or the object, whatever the modifier object the modifier is on. So if we increase the count to 3, it'll just keep adding these cubes down along this line of the x-axis. If we turn that off, if we change that offset to 0, there'll still be 6 cubes. They're just all in the same spot. But if we change the offset to the y-axis to 1, it's going to move those down along the y-axis. Likewise, we change that back to 0 and then change the z-axis to 1. It will stack them exactly one cube high for each one of these cubes. If we turn off the visibility of each modifier down the row, we can see how each one is affecting the development of this cube. So likewise, I can add as many modifiers as I want, and as many of the same kind. So I can add another array, and this one is offset along the x-axis. So it's taking everything done in this modifier stack, which is executed, line by line here, and then adding on to that. So if we increase the count, we are making more and more. So I want to actually drop my subdivision surface modifier to the bottom of the stack here, and well, let's set to 3. That's not too bad. So that's pretty much the array modifier in a nutshell, and there's a lot more things you can do with it, such as a starting object. You can make, like, say you had some kind of crazy box snake thing, like a toy or something, and you want it to have mostly like these cubes for its body, but a special head and a special tail. You can change the object here and here, and it will start it with that thing and end it with that thing. You can also offset, instead of offsetting by the X, Y, and Z axis specifically, you can offset these by an object as well. So that's pretty much the array. I'm going to Control Z to undo this. And the last modifier I want to talk about for now is the simple deform. The simple deform is an extremely cool modifier, and what it does is just deform your object in one of these 4 different ways. So it's by default set to twist, and we can change the amount it twists by adjusting this factor here. And then we can, with these limits here, they stop and start the effect at a certain height of the object. So you can see how the effect is cutting off at a certain point. But we'll change that back to 0. If we change this to bend, we can now increase the factor and bend this object. We could actually bend it all the way around and make a cylindrical object here, which is really cool. And the taper, it tapers off the object either at the bottom or the top of it. So if you were to change it to a negative value, you'd have it moving like that. And ideally, with something like this, you would probably want it to not taper way off to the side, but down the center. But because this object is actually the core sole object of itself is right here, and all this other stuff is pretty much add-ons of effects of these modifiers. So it is bending around the origin of this point here. And so say you wanted it to taper down the middle, what you might want to do is, if we press 1 to go into front view, and say I'll change this factor to 0, and say the middle looks to be right about here. So I'll hold Control and hit right mouse to move my 3D cursor. And I will press Shift A, and I will add what's called an empty. And I'll just add an empty cube. And an empty exists not as a shape, but basically to represent a point in space where you need to be able to acquire that data of that point. So if I hit G to grab this cube, this empty rather, what I can do, well actually I'll move it right back into the center there. What I can do is now I'll click on my cube with all its crazy modifiers on it. Under the simple deform and bold deform, collapse, I can change the origin. The origin of this object is right here, because the actual object, if we turn off all the modifiers, the actual object is just sitting right there. But we can change the origin that it, the effect is changed around by here. So if we select the empty we made, now we change the factor, you'll see that it is skewing to the position where the origin near the center line of the cube, which is, you know, very helpful to get the kind of result you want. So say we actually turn this back to bend and increase this factor like this to where we have like a cylindrical looking object. We can actually add another simple deform and then set it to taper, set the origin to that empty, and then change it like this, and we have, well, let's see, what I would really, I need to actually turn this back to 0. I'm going to press Z to go into wireframe mode, and then double click to deselect everything. Now, this is a good example of why it's nice to have your outliner, because it's getting a little hard to select that empty there, but what I can do is select the empty directly, just like I can select any object directly in my outliner, and now I have that selected. We need to move this to the center. Well, actually what I'm going to have to do is turn off this effect right here, select my empty. Well, it's still moving. What's going on? Let's see. Even though the effect is off, it's still changing the cube. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this effect right here, select my empty, grab it. Okay, so I need to, under this bend simple deform, I need for this, I have it set to where the origin is around the empty, but I don't need it around that one. So I'm going to backspace and delete that and hit enter. So if I select empty here and I move this cube to the center, then I'm going to hit 5 to make sure I'm at the top, or hit 5 to make sure that this this empty is in the center of this object here. Now I'll hit Z to go back into solid mode. So if I have this object selected, I have this simple deform here, bending it into this spherical shape. Now if I add another simple deform and change it to taper and change the origin to my empty, hit 1 to go into front view. Now we can see that this tapers exactly around where this empty is in the center, which is really cool because you might need to create a shape like this for a number of reasons. Could be anything.